This is my reading along a story song, reading along a story song. Da 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 da. Shall we begin? Chapter 5. The Feast. The Poetess. Jhee joined her cohort at their box. Alas, my dear cohort, I'm glad everyone got to see the feast performances. That Mr. Zane was quite handsome and skilled, Murray said. Canto folded his arm. If you're into such unsophisticated fare. Can you believe that poetess, Digne? So embarrassing. I was embarrassed for her, Ray said, then shrugged. A welcome diversion after the bullhound. I near died of fright here on the spot when Shep leaped up. Do you think there'll be animals like that at court? I hear the imperial family keeps pygmy sheldrakes as pets, Kanto said. No. Oh, yes. They continued to giggle and gossip while Shep kept watchful eyes on the entrances as tugged on his forearm hairs. As Jhee approached, she heard him talking to himself. Walls to our back. Good. Walls to the side. If cornered, the only way out is through. So, confined space. No room to maneuver. Shep, she whispered, so she would not startle him. He turned to her and smiled as if to say nothing was amiss. What of you, dear heart? How are you faring? Much better now that you're within arm's reach. Jhee stroked the ridges of his ears with her thumbs. I was in no danger. He brought her hand to his eye scar briefly before standing. Best to be cautious. They returned to the younger spouses. Did you have a chance to try the tranquility gold? I'm sure it must have met with even your high standard, Shep. It was decent. I don't get the fuss. Who convinced whom to attend the feast? We wanted to, Murray said. She and she and Kanto locked arms. We said Shep could we said Shep could stay if he wished. Shep pursed his lips. You could very well not attend the feast unaccompanied, yet alone go about the halls by yourself, Dignes. Hence, we all attended. We would have been fine, Murray said. Perish the thought of any of us having time to ourselves. Indeed, Kanto said. Jhee sighed. Shep did the right thing. We're guests here. It's perhaps best if we stick together in this unfamiliar place. Shep and Jhee made pointed eye contact. She tucked her hands into her robes and touched the sigil. He glanced at the exits. Fine. Then we should all retire to our quarters. Yav yav! Bax entered the hall. Jhee remained in place in contravention of Shep's attempts to herd the lot of them towards the door. He caught her eye again. I have an invitation to tea with the vizier. Return to the room. Hopefully I won't be long. Shep folded his arms. Murray degenerated into a coughing fit. Kanto provided her a steadying arm. Shep cast a stern glance at Bax, then escorted the other spouses out. Jhee's heart tightened as she watched them leave. They passed the poetess, Regan, who grabbed a wine pitcher from the tray of her perspective, clearing the high table. Bax came over. What now, Justicar? All the men of the Abbey appear to be accounted for. There's a population of refugees nearby. So, with buildings such as this, there may be a multitude of hidden ways in and out. A small matter to find one and bring young men in and out. These are professed Drakes, Justicar. One of the eternal dichotomies of celibacy. Make further inquiries into Heather. See what you can learn from the performers and Mr. Paul and his son. Aye, Justicar. Jhee paused about to say something else when she noticed the proximity of the poetess. She sat on one of the seats at the high table, checking the cups for dregs. We'll speak more later. Bax excused himself. Jhee glanced the way her cohort had gone and thought about Murray. She did not like the cast to her pallor. She had hoped some time off the yacht would do her good. Jhee should have joined them, but this was apt to be her last case as a field justicar. There would be time enough for nesting later after she fulfilled her promise to their dames. She would see them safely to the capital where they can decide for themselves what it is they want. Regan, who did not possess a fraction of the grace or poise Murray had in her littlest fingers, continued to hover and scavenge the high tables. How different the poetess was to her late mother, the governess. How different this drunken wastrel was to her Canto and Murray. The poetess was about their age. She thought them a credit to the younger generation. They sought to better themselves despite the hard turns the sea had sent them, while this embarrassment drank away her future and a possible cure to Murray's ailment. The wine being slurped by this wastrel well could well hold the key to Murray's recovery. That Regan could so fragrantly disregard the rules of not only polite behavior, but basic health, and yet remain standing, defied design. Her squandered potential stole momentum from the divine mechanism, where it might better serve those who needed it more. While Murray struggled to do even the minutest activities, this scoundrel wasted twice the energy stumbling about in drunken idleness. At the poetess's age, Jhee's oldest surviving sisters had already begun to distinguish themselves in the Navy. When Jhee reached that age, she had dreamed of following in their footsteps. Jhee marched up to Regan, who had produced a flask. The area around the table still smelled of incense, licorice, and burn cream. Given Regan's state of drunkenness, she expected it to reek of the still. The poetess tipped the pitcher to her flask. What you are doing is not only unseemly, but unsanitary. What exactly is it I'm doing, Justicar? Her words were clear and articulate. The poetess' hands were rock steady. She did not so much as spill a drop. You're not drunk. The poetess put the flask inside her robes. No. It was my proud pleasure to have met the governess. Why such a disgraceful ruse? Your mother's eyes are still upon you. It is because of her I'm here. Fools can go about nearly invisible and inquire where others can't, much like Justicars. So, there is more method than madness to your poem as well. If you have some proof of a crime, I'll hear it and render fair judgment. Proof. Therein lies the problem. I like my tongue and my head precisely where they are. I've made it my mission to ensure such harsh penalties are no longer imposed in the district. For slander or libel penalties to apply, a false charge would have to be leveled. However, gossip amongst board residents is simply uncorroborated evidence, not an not an accusation. Jhee took the picture from the poetess. She squared her shoulders and added sternly, "Nor proof." Regan nodded. Zahaley and my mother served together, and they corresponded often. She was concerned about odd happenings at the Abbey, whisperings in the walls, weird lights, odd behavior amongst the staff and novices. She sent a communique where she stated another authority was undermining her. I questioned some of the staff and novices. A name continued to come up, the Mist Abbess. Zahaley died soon thereafter. My mother succumbed to illness before she could inquire into it herself. Fresh lung sickness. I promised on her deathbed to investigate. Jhee flinched. Her gaze flicked to where her family had left. Most admirable. What have you found out so far? Taking vows here may become hazardous to one's health, at least if you're male. Someone may have taken it upon themselves to correct the surplus male problem. Three so far that I know of, all since the first quake. Who knows how many more there may be? I don't have the skills to investigate thoroughly alone. I am simply a poet. You have legal backing and imperial authority at your disposal, which also carries a decidedly higher profile and standard of conduct. I implore you, if not for my sake, then for Akashem. A simple request. Before Jhee could inquire further, Piermo re entered the banquet hall. Regan knocked over a cup and snatched the pitcher Jhee held. Justicar, you're still here. The abbess gave Regan a look of utter contempt. Is this wretched creature bothering you? Regan uprighted the cup. Jhee took the pitcher back. Just discussing proper conduct with our young poetess here, and the vagaries of poetry. Regan's, Regan's formerly alert gaze was now glazed over and unfocused. It's nice to meet a learned woman, sophisticated enough to nuance my poetry, unlike the rest of you bores. Perhaps I should go share my poems with the honored dead in the choral cloister. Perhaps they'll appreciate it more. Regan staggered away. The abbess relieved Jhee of the pitcher. My forgiveness for your being subjected to her. None needed. It was most illuminating. The poetess's carrying on has been most shameful. There are a great many young men and women here, and it's for those of a certain stature to set the example. I shudder to think how the governess would have reacted if she were alive to see what has become of her only heir. No doubt she would have been most distressed. Perhaps the allure of your delicious wine overwhelmed her. With the exception of those who work the vats, professed and prospective alike are only permitted one tankard of our house wines a week, or a thimbleful daily for health, except on certain occasions. They may also partake of small amounts of collal during services, but no other stimulant drinks. She appears to have found a way around our restrictions. I'll have to tell the staff to be more mindful. This is not the first time I've found her such. You know, I even found her going through my things in the wine cellar the other day. Truly, truly distressing when such a compulsion drives you to such lengths. Pierrot studied the picture she held for a moment, then placed it on the table. I had hoped to teach her self-discipline, and in some small measure, our teachings would have a benevolent impact on her. In that I am failing. Perhaps you may have more luck in straightening the young Pris out. Is that all that troubles you, Abbess? The deacons mentioned recent deaths. I appreciate how you were able to navigate the waters between those two. When Pierrot said nothing more, Jhee attempted a different approach. During my stay, I was hoping to get a tour of the Abbey. In addition to the archives and ingenious hothouses, I heard of your famous choral cloister and crypts. For now, I'm afraid this beautiful Abbey has me a bit turned around. Where might I find the vizier's room? I can escort you if you wish. The vizier currently occupies our hermitage. My thanks. Such an intriguing design to your central hall. The abbess walked her out an entrance different than the one which led to the main dormitories. The abbey's layout follows the principles of sacred geometry. 6 inches from 6 halls to represent the 6 pillars of society. Jhee jutted her chin at the chained door nearest them. Where does that door lead? The corrections hall. What of the other? The other, the crypts. Both are off limits. They sustained some damage during the recent quakes. I hope no one was hurt. That isn't where the young man died, is it? Not there. Both had already been closed by then. The hall due to Saheli's order. She took a different view of discipline than past abbesses. As for the crypts, the risk of flooding has put them off limits during the storms. The extreme moisture also interferes during the first few years of the preservation process we use on our honored dead, such as my predecessor. May I inquire as to how your predecessor died? Disease? Disaster? Transfiguration. Her spirit ascended in light directly to the Maker's sphere, while several of us watched. A transcendent sight I might have questioned had I and the high clergy not witnessed it ourselves. Remarkable. What events preceded this extraordinary occurrence? Saheli and I had spoken just that morning about Abbey business. She pursued several crafting and artistic pursuits in the gardens. The weather that day was sunny, not wet and black like now. Professed as well as the visiting scholar, Sister Nisa, also there for contemplation, later heard her performing alignment chants. Then the sound of her engaged in dialogue with the makers. How can you be sure it was the makers? Those who saw her said no one else was there, and she sat alone on the bench. But she had completed the most exquisite sketch of her cat, no doubt via the maker's inspiration. She announced her intentions to take advantage of the clear weather and spend the rest of the afternoon in contemplation via construction in her favorite place, the bridge tower. Some time later, she summoned me, the prioress, the deacons, and a visiting scholar, Nisa. She delivered an hour-long sermon about the nature of ciphering and drawing with respect to the pillars of society. The Imperial Theological Department is even considering adopting it as a primary text. Impressive. To qualify for consideration means an independent account exists. Where might I view a copy? The archives. Saheli preached with transcendent power and full of the most inspired and eloquent language. The great thinker Yerisa, upon reading Sister Nisa's account, wrote a 10-page annotated commentary of its allusions and symbolisms. Those of us present felt the strength and power of her words in our bones. Her spirit became visible. A great beam of light appeared. She spoke her last words and passed out dead on the spot. With a great blinding flash of light, her spirit ascended the beam to the divine spheres. Before it disappeared, I touched it and was left with these burns. The abbess displayed her hands, then tucked them away. I know you already think us backward and superstitious, but Nisa witnessed it too. The recent death had quite upset the residents of Tranquility Bridge. Justicar, were you sincere about offering us your services? Of course, abbess. Being a woman of law and letters, I thought if you were able to reassure everyone and find a more natural, mundane cause, it would put many minds at ease. As a holy woman yourself, you see no work of unmakers in this? I know unmakers, especially the unmaker, prefers to use mortal faces to hide your true intent. Here we are, the vizier's chambers. Some of Saheli's artwork and writings were put in the archives. The rest of her belongings were interred with her in the crypts. Her remains and belongings may someday be counted as relics themselves, on par with our other honored dead. This right here is one of Saheli's works. An etching hung beside a door illuminated by a glow orb. Jhee admired the workmanship. Superb. What superb. What became of the cat? The cat. Oh yes. We buried it in the garden, under her favorite tree. I would very much like to read that account, and the sermon, if I may, but it seems as if Sister Elkanah has taken a dislike to me. Ask the vizier. Sister Elkanah holds her in high regard. Perhaps if she were to speak on your behalf, she might be more inclined to grant you access. Many thanks. Many thanks. Is there an opportunity for me to autopsy Saheli's remains? My duties require some training in forensic and mortuary sciences. My first husband and wife also have some medical training. I'd be interested in what the act of transfiguration does to our mortal form. Autopsy. The preservation process may prevent that, and as I said, the crypts are sealed right now. I'm also afraid I cannot allow a male to examine such a holy person as our abbess or near our most sacred spaces. I shall consult with the prioress. I must leave you now and attend to other matters. Once Pirmo left, Jhee examined the etching once more. Exceptional work. The tiny pop of grit ground underfoot drew her attention. She paused to listen, then stared into the darkness beyond the orb. She waited for her eyes to adjust, but saw no one. A whiff of the air proved equally fruitless. Because of the drenched poultice, all she smelled was mint. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6. The Audience. Tea time. On the other side of the door from the etching, the wallboard panel with a placard pad, Jhee placed her conch against it and transmitted her social credentials. Pyramid had not delivered her a formal invitation, so she defaulted to social protocol. The panel displayed the lady's seal, then the door opened. Jhee's position relative to hers did not require that. Jhee entered and waited by the open door to be acknowledged. Every piece of furniture was black lacquer, no doubt brought with her from the capital. Nothing in the room was simple and utilitarian, as Jhee might have expected of someone who had retired to such an austere place. The vizier's chambers were adorned in antique instruments and battle regalia, feathered animal headdresses, war aprons with the sea bat or silver fox, obsidian spheres with hardwood throwing shuttles, the gold and green tabards of the ancient warrior societies, battle flutes, war drums, the trace of high-grade incense hung in the air. Along the walls, shelves stacked with books and seaweed parchments alternated with others containing chests and other curios. She acknowledged Jhee's presence with a look and gestured to a small table with a gilded tea service set up in the middle of the room on an exquisitely woven rug with the curved and repeating borders popular with the great houses of the capital. Jhee closed the door and seated herself properly. The tea had a heavy, earthy smell more similar to kalal, likely a blend of the two. The lady hummed a little passage of music, then finished a last bit of writing with her fingernail quill. She considered the page, then smiled. At last she joined Jhee. As for the lady herself, she was an imperiously postured woman with high cheekbones, who dressed in robes a step or two in finery above anything Jhee might have worn. Her fur showed the silvering of age, but just barely. Her esca appeared bright as ever. "Allow me to pour, Justicar." The vizier poured the steaming kolal into the cup in front of Jhee. Jhee waited for the vizier to fill her own cup. She slipped the insulated sleeve over the cup, then turned it thrice before picking it up in both hands. "Honors, vizier." The vizier turned the cup twice. "Honors to you as well, Justicar." Jhee drank a moment after the vizier. "It's good to see the injuries you received in the quake haven't slowed you down." "Thank you for your concern. You are familiar with high etiquette?" "I have been in the extended court in the outer reaches, and the capital." "Never long enough for it to sink its claws in, I'll wager." "The politics takes its toll, although it can be dull at times, and I had to seek my own amusement. Clever girl to stay out of depths you may not be prepared to handle. Keep above the waves as long as you can, I say." Jhee smirked. She attributed the slight she felt to being called girl. Some time had passed since anyone had dared. Vizier Bathsheba was likely to have been an adolescent when she was born. "The storm shield has changed much." "Alas, Vizier, as storm and sea reclaim the reaches, it is my fate to be reassigned to the capital. It is now my honor to serve at court. And you decided to stop at our humble abbey along the way. Poor dear, allow me to put something stronger in that cup of yours." "No need, my lady. I think I would like to keep a clear head after the day's events." Everywhere Jhee turned in the room she found more treasures. She did her best not to marvel. "Vizier, I must admit to being in awe of your fine possessions, especially the lute. My second husband also plays one and is an admirer of your work." "A member of the imperial family gave me that. May I ask what brings you to Tranquility Bridge?" Our vessel required repairs, although I have heard some disturbing tales. Oh, of what sort? The prioress told me the cloister ghost, while the deacons speak about malign forces and unmakers, especially in the Zodiac courtyard, where the young man died. Word you seen some. A place of such history must surely have its share of secrets as well. Then there is the abbess's remarkable account of the death of her predecessor. I too heard something of Pirmo's account and read Nisa's account. Your credentials. During my tenure, they still spoke of an imperial wedding stormed by adherents of the monogamous school. Your grandam preached with them for a time. Surely she would have some words over your cohort. Grandma Mare joined the Makers some years ago. I'm told all the most prestigious residents of the Abbey witnessed the miraculous event. What's your recollection? To be honest, I'm not sure. I'm not as religious or zealous as some. I do know we sat in a room for 2 to 3 hours without much in the way of food or drink, under less than ideal conditions. Who knows what phantoms devout minds might conjure up? You believe no transcendence took place? Who am I to say? It is a matter of faith for each one present, but not you. I have become something of a hermit. I am here to meditate and reflect. My goal was never oneness with the Makers as some others, nor did I seek refuge from the war mind. I contemplated service, you see. I wanted to participate in the effort to defend our lands and way of life, as we are told so often we should in the end, I always chose not to commit. Yourself? I for the most part saw no combat, but not for the whole part. Sounds like a story there. One I won't bore you with. As you desire. You're only in your position a few years, I take it, judging by your accent and the style of your robes from the far reaches, and no doubt ambitious. I understand the desire to leave simple country ways behind. What are the lives of simple country folk compared to the thrill of court? Yet you remain humble and remember from whence you came. Handmade robes and an unsophisticated head wrap. A traditional provincial marriage cohort. 2 men, 1 woman. I'm surprised one so unestablished took a full complement before you reached the capital, where more opportunities for strategic marriages awaited. I don't envy you having to balance those responsibilities. Jhee's finger twitched. Duty sometimes demands a different path. You are ambitious, looking to move up. Difficult to do that with something like that hanging over you. New marriages hastily put together. I suppose to show up at court with only one consort would it have made the wrong impression. A full cohort shows a break with your grandma's monogamous beliefs. I am but a simple servant to the office. Forgive me, I did not mean to imply. The urge to touch her head wrap or Canto's repairs to her robe made Jhee focus all the more on holding her cup. She had been relieved to wear the simple, elegant gowns when she expected to be dealing with a hermit-like public tutor. She had not wanted to put on airs. Faced with the sophisticated, urbane Bathsheba of Toho, instead, she felt more like a backward country rustic. Fine. If the vizier thought her a backwater, she would use it. Jhee pinched the bridge of her nose. I did see something odd when performing devotions at the main shrine. A figure embracing a naked one-armed man. This dreadful weather has given me the most egregious headache, and possibly a cold. My eyes may not have been as reliable as they once were. Maybe enough to imagine that. Do you partake of a lot of creel? It's a staple of the signature dish of our district. It's been my experience that an abundance of Creole, in addition to sometimes turning you pink, can hamper mental functioning. In conjunction with the tiredness or poor health, I say you have a recipe for hallucination. You sound like my wife with her dietetic beliefs. She sounds like a wise woman. Perhaps, indeed, you are both right. I rather prefer that to the alternative, vengeful spirits drawn by an abundance of death or unwed souls. I found a draught, part Tranquility Bridge's orange cider, part signature nectar, part black orchid tea, very detoxifying and good for the constitution. The vizier hesitated and leaned forward. Did your ship really need repairs? Jhee opted for caution in the event she misread the woman. Have I given you cause to think otherwise? Jhee asked. An abundance of death. What an interesting choice of words. You've never seen fit to visit our Abbey before. 3 dead perspectives should would have certainly drawn the attention of an involved Justicar. I would have thought, rather than chasing after phantoms of the mind, you had instead come to seek my counsel in the depth of those poor unfortunate souls. I do admit I had an ulterior motive in inviting you here, to see if some word of our plight and the fates of those 3 perspectives had made it beyond these walls. Jhee sipped her kalal and tried not to take umbrage. The vizier at least confirmed Reigen's findings. The dead men were not refuge seekers or lay brothers, but men who had committed to the Drakist way. My office had no reports of 3 prospective deaths, yet here you sit. True, there is no reason the death should have been reported. One boy, attended by the Abbey physician, and myself appeared to have died of sickness. The other 2 were likely accidents or suicide. One died in a cave-in, the other fell while walking along the bluffs, all autopsied by the prioress. The passing of poor rural boys, of consequence to no one, even their officials. Jhee's grip on her cup tightened. What a lovely finger maze. Does the vizier indulge in the art of sequence and gesture puzzles? A recent find from the archives. One piece of a larger set. I had been working on identifying it, though parts are missing. I've dabbled. May I? The vizier nodded. I'd be interested in the assistance of someone so studied as yourself. This one appears to be missing the key which tells you how to start. Would you care to try anyway? Jhee weighed the desire to rest and extricate herself from the vizier's high-handedness against the opportunity to match which with an early ciphering enthusiast. I've taken up too much of your time, vizier. The vizier pushed the puzzle closer. Jhee performed a few gestures and solved a few levels in before tripping up. My, that was a tricky one. Ah, delightful. Might I make a suggestion? Have you finally seen it used by someone as skilled as yourself? I see it has something of musicality to it. Keep in mind rhythm and flow, and you should be able to progress further. How clever of them to incorporate musical timing rather than geometric or trigonometric principles. Two, two simultaneous left-hand sequences. I think it may require more than one participant. Oh, I see. You pass it along like a relay or rounds. This might require some time and assistance from my wife to unravel. I have to return to my cohort, else they'll think I've gotten lost. The vizier poured them another cup of tea. Jhee turned the cup, then lifted it with both hands. I thank the vizier again for her invitation. Honors to your house and health. The vizier raised her cup one-handed, without turnings. No need for such ceremony, and please call me Bathsheba. I left court to get away from such formality. An acutely pleasant change. You'll have to walk me through how to use the finger maze before you leave the Abbey. Once Jhee matched her, they drank at the same time. Jhee set down her cup. The vizier escorted her to the door. Jhee hesitated when she glimpsed the edge of Saheli's etching. Was there something else, Justicar? I hesitate to impose more on you, Lady Bathsheba. The etching. What do you think of Pirmo's account of the death of her predecessor? Is there anything you care to add? I spoke to her as normal, and then we parted company before her noon meal. The vizier glanced around her again. I hesitate to relay gossip. Saheli was prone to taking psychedelics around the time she took her images for the day. I wasn't It wasn't unusual to hear her speaking with the makers during her vision quests. Perspectives near her thought nothing of the conversation, as she frequently had them. What she was not in the habit of doing was giving impromptu sermons. The Abbey is about personal reflection and inner peace. It came then as a shock when this one day she called upon the senior clerics to hear her preach. She gave the sermon and died. You should read Sister Nisa's account, as it is most illuminating. We have a copy of it in our archives. I would like to, but Sister Elkanah doesn't seem inclined to grant me access. Sister Sarah used you to show her up, didn't she? Afraid so. The pitching and yawing between those two. The previous abbess had to do an intricate balancing act to keep them from tearing the abbey apart. They were very protective of their respective fiefdoms. If you desire access to the archives, I might be able to arrange it with the archivist. Consider it done, on one condition. If it is my humble power to do so, I shall. You simply must consent to be my guest for tea again, along with your lovely household. It is rare I get to converse with such learned and higher class individuals as yourself. I also welcome the opportunity to meet a fan. Jhee was loath to expose her cohort to the woman's snobbery. Yet an outright refusal would be an insult. Not only would it prevent her from examining the archives, but it might also follow them to court. We had a hard journey. I will see if they are up to it. Splendid! Jhee affected a meek air. This abbey appears to have been constructed in accordance with sacred geometry tenets, overly elaborate and confusing as if designed by building over serpent trails. That's ascetics for you. Celibacy. A natural crime, if you ask me. Lady Bathsheba laughed. A natural crime indeed. My secret? I use maps. One of the perks of my position as librarian is access to the old building records. I'll ether you a copy. Jhee still, Jhee's still too full conch refused the transfer. Allow me to get you a hand map and a torch. The lady rolled out a digital parchment and transcriber. A physical copy will serve you better in this weather anyway, though it won't have live position tracking. Your recognition of the sacred design of this abbey is correct. We are here, now, at the bridge wing off the prime axis. These are your quarters in the opposite wing. You'll have to cross the central hall again to reach them. Jhee touched two of the marked openings. I saw these barred doors in the banquet hall, the corrections hall, part museum, part throwback to a stricter time in the Drakists' history, where they kept misbehaving perspectives and professed. Quite lurid tales of what transpired there exist in the archives. Forbidden orgies, naive juveniles forced to perform blasphemous rites, imprints left from the previous residents, or maybe even your ghosts. The other leads to the crypts. Jhee laid a finger on the side of her nose. The abbess had told her the truth. Jhee rolled up the map. I thank you for this, Lady Bathsheba. You'll need a provision card for the storehouse. It also includes an invite key for your next visit. Remember, orange cider is the key. Outside in the hall, Jhee adjusted her head wrap and consulted the map. Sacred geometry indeed. A quick count and some